And we are now live broadcasting. It's Ted Ritzer, host of the Greening Government Speaker Series. Today we're joined by a person that I think, she has one of the shortest job descriptions that in my 30 years of working for the government of Alberta, I would say it's the toughest, most ambitious, and strategic job description I've ever read. So I'm reading the job description of ADM Sandra Locke, and allow me to read that job description. Okay, so Sandra will introduce an overview of Alberta's recently announced climate leadership plan, including economy-wide carbon pricing, revenue recycling, phasing out coal-fired electricity and enhancing renewable energy, the establishment of an oil sands emissions cap, and a methane reduction target and energy efficiency. Wow. That is a heck of a job description.
Yeah.
Sandra, and we are so fortunate for you to join us today and present on that challenge. Well, maybe it's the challenge of the century.
Thanks so much, Ted. And I think all of us here in government know that it's the other duties as assigned that fills out your job description. So yeah, it is a challenge, but we're building a team here in Environment and Parks, and people are pretty psyched up to get on with it. Should I jump right into the presentation here? Okay, let me share the screen. It's taking a minute here to load up. Okay, Ted, can you see that? Well, thanks so much, everyone, for participating. It's certainly been a bit of a whirlwind. I started working with the Climate Change Secretariat back in July, and immediately after the Premier's announcement in November, government decided to stand up a division specifically to implement those changes and to deal with all things climate change writ large. So there was, as I think you all know, a climate change a branch of a division in the department, and now that's all come together in one place in the Climate Change Strategy Division. I'll talk a little bit about some of the high-level announcements that happened back in November. You'll notice that there's not a lot of detail on many of this. I'll talk a little bit at the end about the work plan, but very much the work we're doing right now is gearing up to consult, to develop proposals, and to get down to the implementation side of the announcement. The advisory panel was stood up just this past summer by the Premier and the Minister, and it was chaired by Dr. Andrew Leach from the University of Alberta. He had a number of colleagues join him: Angela Adams from here in Alberta, Stephanie Kearns from British Columbia, Linda Cody, who works with Enbridge in Calgary, and Gord Lambert. Gord's a retired Suncor employee and a leader in the technology side of oil sands advancement. Their mandate was to engage with Albertans, and we certainly put together a comprehensive consultation plan for them. With stakeholders, they met across 10 or 12 technical engagements with specific stakeholders. And with Indigenous communities, we set up 3 consultation processes with Indigenous communities. To get input on the climate change approach, there was a discussion document that was released in August that formed the basis of that discussion. And there also was a survey that quite a number of people, I think about 25,000 people completed. So a lot of input was given to the panel in terms of their recommendations and the process they went through. They worked very closely with many departments across government, of course, ours, but also energy, the old innovation and advanced education, which is now economic development and trade. They have presentations from folks in municipal affairs from many departments. They also engaged with the Alberta Electric System Operator for things related to the electricity system, coal and renewables specifically. The plan was presented to government from the panel, but the panel's presentation and the panel's report there was no reference to accepting that report in the Premier's press conference. And the reason for that is not that they disagreed with much or anything really in the panel's report. It's that they brought in some of their own work and some of their own thinking, and I'll get into that. And they also looked to much of what was in the panel's report to advise us in terms of implementation. 3 key pieces of the Premier's announcement in November: the carbon pricing, specific direction on electricity, and that is coal and renewables, specific direction on oil sands, and specific direction on methane. Of course, we all know there's a lot more in terms of Alberta's emission profile than those 3 pieces. Those other pieces, for example, transportation, are not excluded. They just were not highlighted as key near-term wins right now, but they certainly will be in the planning process as we move forward. On the carbon pricing, the leadership plan that was announced made a commitment to provide a carbon charge on the combustion of fuels. So that includes gasoline and diesel. It also includes natural gas, which is a new system that we're working with Energy and Treasury Board and Finance to define. We've never put a government levy on natural gas before, or certainly not in the recent history, and so folks are building that system. There's also a move away from the design and specifics of the existing specified gas emitters regulation. Right now, that specified gas emitters regulation requires a performance compliance obligation relative to the history of that specific operation. The panel's recommendation and government's announcement was to move away from a plant-specific performance obligation and move it to broader industry-wide sector-based performance standards. So instead of trying to comply with your last 3 years or your history, you're complying against the best in your industry. Lots of definitions yet to be worked through in terms of how that will be applied across 10 or 12 sectors, but that essentially is the principle, that if you're an oil refiner, then your refining performance will be benchmarked against other performers in that industry. And then there was a lot of conversations about how the revenue will be used, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So what the combustion fuel means is that we now have much broader coverage of climate change policy across the economy. Previously, when it was just specified gas emitters, it only covered large industry, and the rest of us who are general consumers didn't have an obligation. Some specifics on how the combustion fuel will be applied. It applies to transportation and heating, and at the distributor or importer stage. So if you export fuels that won't attract the carbon price. There is the expectation that dyed fuels for agriculture purposes will be exempt. That was discussed, though it wasn't part of the Premier's announcement. It certainly was part of conversations that we've had. And also fuels produced and used on site in small oil and gas facilities will have 5 years to get systems in place. That is one fuel consumption aspect that we don't really have a lot of information on. While we understand that they do use produced fuels, applying a levy to that would be a much more complicated process than applying it at the pump where you and I fill up our cars. So we've got a 5-year window to define and develop systems to incorporate those fuels. The carbon levy on consumed fuels is $20 starting January 1, 2017. What that means for us in the division is that fuel applies in the fourth quarter of the next fiscal budget. So that means we have some work to do between now and the budget to define and determine what revenue streams are going to come from that. In 2018, it catches up to the existing specified gas emitters and goes to $30 from 2019 on. It will increase in real terms, and so what that means is inflation plus, and the plus part is probably going to be around the 1 to 3% range, but there are some parameters on that. It will be a cabinet decision every year, is our expectation, and it will be based in part on what our competing jurisdictions are doing. So if here in North America other folks are moving at the same pace that we're moving, we can expect to see those increases happening on an annual basis. If we find ourselves getting out too far in front, we may be providing advice to government to think about just slowing down for a little while till we all catch up. So competitiveness was talked about right through the panel's work, right through conversations to come to the Premier's announcement. So the competitiveness aspect of carbon pricing is definitely in the forefront of policy development. I talked a little bit earlier about the product and sector-based performance standards. The existing specified gas emitters reg applies to, in terms of compliance obligation, applies to facilities emitting more than 100,000 tons. There's no change to that threshold. And so that stays as it is, but that defines who the performance standards apply to right now. It'll be on a product on an output basis, so that's slightly different from the way it works now. So things like process emissions are going to be captured on the new system, which perhaps they weren't under the old. So this allows a lot more transparency and benchmarking across other jurisdictions, across other refineries in North America, refineries internationally, for example, or oil or gas production facilities. In the announcement, the Premier talked about how the revenue would be used, and she referred to the term revenue neutral. And what her intent in that is that the revenue would not be used for general revenue for general government purposes. It would be specifically earmarked for two types of investments. One that reduces emissions, and another envelope, I call it, that supports adjustments as industry, as the economy, and as consumers and individuals and families adjust to this new carbon framework. Supports will be provided. So in terms of the measures to reduce emissions, things were talked about in terms of investments in clean technology, in renewable energy, in energy efficiency, those sorts of greening the economy, greening the grid types of investments. One of the pieces is that renewable energy will be advanced significantly. We see that as being a big draw on the revenue that comes in. Measures that support adjustment, so transition help to individuals and businesses. Part of that is about coal-fired power being phased out. and the need to ensure that individuals and communities worker transition supports are in place. Part of it is about helping individuals adjust to the carbon price. So obviously everybody's bills are going to go up when this charge is in place in 2017. Government is looking at a rebate program that will support low and middle income Albertans to make that adjustment. We haven't worked through all the details yet in terms of how exactly that will be applied. We've had many conversations with Treasury Board and Finance. They're looking to use the existing income tax system to allow that to happen. Working very closely with them to define thresholds, to define amounts, and to set that system up. Government would like to have it set up in 2017, and that would be, it's a bit of a stretch target to get too early in 2017 because we depend a lot on the Canada Revenue Agency for a lot of those systems. So systems work to be developed, but also some policy to be designed and proposed in terms of the thresholds and the amounts. So quite a lot of work ongoing on that right now. On electricity, I referred to the phase out of coal. So the Premier has made the announcement that emissions from coal-fired power will cease in 2030. We're working closely with the Department of Energy, and they're working with the electric system operator to define how exactly that's going to happen and the impact on the electricity system, the megawatts that go through. There is a lot of coal planned to be shut down in the 2020s in any event. The federal coal-fired power regulations had required a specific hard end of life if emissions couldn't be brought essentially down to where natural gas emissions are. And so with the expectation that quite a bit of coal is coming off, there is a limited number of plants that have to be dealt with that would be planned to be in existence post-2030. So Energy and the ISO are working very hard on that. Renewable generation, government wants to replace much of this coal with renewable generation such as wind and hydro and solar and other technologies that might be available to us. In order to advance renewable generation, they're looking at providing support such as renewable energy credits. Again, the Department of Energy and the ISO are working hard to figure out what that is going to look like, what an auction system is going to look like. They will have to get it moving fairly quickly. I suspect before the end of 2016, they'll have an auction system in place. Whether the first auction happens next year or early in 2017 is yet to be determined, but that's going to be a big aspect of it. Sector-based performance standards, again, I talked about that in the context of electricity. That is another piece that will layer on top of the end of life in 2030. So between now and 2030, there still will be expectations on emissions performance. And I talked also about the adjustment support that government will be looking at to transition that industry. I think I covered most of that, but just to give you the numbers, 2/3 of coal generation capacity will be replaced by renewable energy, and the other third by natural gas. We see natural gas build out in the next 15 years as being quite substantial, not just to replace the coal, but to backstop and provide firm generation for renewables. The renewables in our system that we have available to us in any kind of scale is what they call intermittent in the electricity system, so they have to have a firm capacity back in them. The wind doesn't always blow, and so there needs to be a generator available to keep the grid moving when the wind's not blowing. And again, the performance standard and the specified gas emitters or SGER regulation is going to be in place till the end of 2017, and after that we transition to a new sector-wide performance standard in 2018. Oil sands is another big component of government's plan. The annual limit on oil sands emissions of 100,000 megatons is something we're working with energy and the regulator to define. We will be doing some consultations with industry. There's a lot of questions yet to be fleshed out in terms of exactly what that means. What happens when you come close to it? Is there opportunity to use offsets? How does the economy deal with a limit on oil sands emissions, and how do we get ready for that from technology, from trading systems, that sort of thing. Lots of policy work left to be done on that. And again, performance standards will be a key part of the oil sands sector as well. Lots of policy work there. Benchmarking and performance standards is going to be a key part of what we do here in this division in 2016. Another leg of the stool is the methane management program. Government announced that it will reduce methane emissions by 45% by 2025, which is a significant contribution to emission reductions in Alberta. And as well, existing and new facilities will have different sorts of requirements, different timing. We're working with industry and the regulator, as well as the Department of Energy, to transition existing facilities through standards on equipment and processes. Those standards on equipment and processes will apply to new facilities that are built. So next steps for us, so I mentioned that our division was very recently stood up. We're working with a number of cross-ministry implementation teams. There's a deputy minister's implementation team that's co-chaired by the Deputy Minister of Environment, Bill Weary, as well as a Deputy Minister from Executive Council. There's an ADM cross-ministry committee. There's a number of working committees. I've referred already to a number of things that we're doing with energy and the ISO and the AER. So quite a lot of work happening. We're working very closely with the Department of Finance and Treasury Board on the carbon charge. We're working with PAB on how we get Albertans ready next year to understand how this carbon charge is going to apply and some of the benefits they can see from whether it's energy efficiency programming or rebate programs. Our priorities as a division are in some ways set for us. We don't have a lot of input into some of this. Budget 1617, as everyone in government knows, is something that Treasury Board and Finance are working very hard on right now. That budget is normally announced in March or April of the new year. Because the carbon charge will be in place during the last quarter of that budget, we need to have a lot of things figured out quite early in 2016. And so we're working quite hard on that. A number of the programming and the recycling aspects will have to be understood at a certain level for that budget as well. A lot of the work that we have on the policy side will require consultation. I referred to the 100 megaton cap on oil sands, for example. We would like to sit down with stakeholders to define what the outstanding questions are and to prepare and provide government with options in terms of how to deal with those questions. We will be providing government advice on specific programming around things like energy efficiency. We are working quite hard here in the department on energy efficiency and whether we strike an agency or a third-party facilitator to deliver those programs or not is another piece that we're working on to give to government for their decisions. A lot of what I've talked about is going to require legislation or regulation, certainly legislation at a minimum. And we're expecting and planning right now for that most of the legislation to happen in the fall of 2016. And so we're working right now to define what all those pieces are and to get folks working on that. So we're developing as well structures and processes, because the climate change leadership strategy that the Premier announced is not a static policy. I talked already about, prices may increase. I didn't mention, but it's possible that stringencies and emissions may increase. The way the revenue gets recycled is going to be an annual conversation for government. So we're putting in place the structures and processes to make sure that those decisions are made, or the information that government needs to make those decisions are readily available and part of a standard and reoccurring decision-making process. So that's part of the work we're doing as well. So that concludes my presentation. Still working on quite a lot of details, as I mentioned. We have a very strong team here in the climate change group that existed in the department. We're looking to stand up quite a few other positions to ensure that we can implement this program and make government successful in what is, as Ted mentioned, one of the biggest policy fronts that this government has announced since they've been in. Ted, do you moderate questions? I think that's...
Yes, I do, Sandra. And I guess what I would encourage people to do is post questions either through the online chat window, which I see Mayor Charlene Brown has posted a question, or through the Q&A. So I'll start with, I think the first question posed was from Mayor Charlene Brown, was a question, as a micro producer, are we looking at getting rebates either as a municipality or as an individual?
I talked about the performance standards. So the performance standards won't be based on plants, they'll be based on the output. So in this case, we're talking about electricity. So electricity will have a performance standard that will be defined in the regulation, and that sets the obligation for hydrocarbon producing plants that produce electricity, but it also defines the offsets available as a revenue stream for those producing renewables. So that our expectation is that performance standard will give renewable energy an opportunity to participate like they do now in the offset system.
Okay, excellent. So the next question, okay, I'll just scroll up here, is from Micah Melross. In BC, the government rebated the carbon tax to municipalities who committed to carbon neutrality. Would something similar be considered in Alberta?
I think it's too early to say right now how government would recycle money to municipalities. They certainly are interested in municipal participation in energy systems and distributed energy systems, in energy efficiency. Is it going to be defined exactly the way that Mike has asked? I'm not quite sure. Early days yet, but I can say that government is very interested in municipal participation in emissions reductions. Okay.
Now another question from Lori Risling-Wynn is, if communities are setting targets and developing climate action plans, should we wait for further information on implementation from the province, or just go forward now without knowing all the details of the climate leadership plan?
I would encourage you to keep moving, to define your projects. When government is ready to announce specific programs, having a concept and having a plan in place in your community, I think would get you a leg up, because you'd be ready to move on whatever the funding program looks like. So I definitely encourage people to keep moving.
Okay. So question from Alex McWilliam. Do you expect the Climate Change and Emissions Management Act to continue to be the primary piece of legislation with respect to climate change, or will it be replaced with a new statute?
What the name of the new statute is, whether it will be CCEMA or whether it'll be reprofiled to be something else, I can't say. I can say, though, that amendments will have to be made to accommodate some of the changes that government has talked about, especially with respect to the performance standard system for large final emitters. So amendments to legislation are going to be required. Now, whether government takes the opportunity to reprofile and reprogram the legislation at that time is a question I can't really answer. But the overall structure for large final emitters is going to stay relatively the same. What will change is the benchmarking that they will be required to comply with.
Okay. So another one is, I just have to scroll up here a bit. Can you speak to the expected impact on municipalities? We're interested in potential funding or rebates available, cost impact on operations, and impact on our landfills and water treatment plants.
Right now, the carbon charge is intended to be applied to consumed fuels, so there is no expectation that that charge is going to impact emissions from landfills or water treatment plants. Obviously, if government is collecting this revenue, people are paying it, whether it's individuals, municipalities, companies, small businesses. How programs are going to be scheduled and set up to support municipalities, we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't defined what those programs would look like, or I should say we haven't presented options to government as yet. But we have had about the need for energy efficiency programming to have partnerships with municipalities. Government has recognized that municipalities are a key delivery agent for a lot of what government is attempting to accomplish.
Okay. Excuse me. With a goal of lowering methane by 45%, will there be any focus on methane produced by livestock?
It hasn't come up as yet. The agriculture industry and that sector with respect to methane hasn't been included. It's been strictly oil and gas.
Okay. When will energy efficiency programs be launched?
We are working very hard to get a very high-level budget submission in for the 2016 budget. In that, we expect to define at a very high level what energy efficiency programming would look like. We have to work over the next 3 or 4 months to define how a program could be delivered and what the most efficient delivery mechanism is. That's going to be part of what government announces in the spring.
Okay. And another comment was, and does the climate leadership plan include adaptation?
It doesn't. That was explicitly excluded from both the consultation process with the panel and also from the climate leadership plan. We do recognize, though, in the department that adaptation is a key part of what we need to do, and we'll be doing some work in 2016 to define how we engage and how we put consultation programs together for adaptation.
Okay. And has there been a decision on the future of the Climate Change Emissions Management Corporation?
No. I know we've had conversations with them and with the Department of Economic Development and Trade, which now has responsibility for technology and innovation. Technology and innovation are very key to achieving the outcomes that government has set for emissions management in the oil sands and the oil and gas industry. And so there will need to be a mechanism to manage technology and innovation and funding for that. So it's still under review.
Okay. Will there be support provided to smaller communities in understanding the community energy emissions? And, oops. Sorry about that. I'm just scrolling down. People are posting so many, Sandra, I can't keep up here. Sorry about that.
Ted, I'm just going to close the blind behind me. I see that the sun is shining right on my screen. Just 1 minute, please.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Sandra, so rereading that question from Michelle Gartner, will there be support provided to smaller communities in understanding the community energy emissions, either technical or financial?
That level of detail in terms of what a specific program would look like hasn't been discussed at that level. I imagine, though, that it fits the bill in terms of what we would need to see happen in smaller communities to manage emissions. First, you have to have that technical data and understand where your most efficient opportunities are.
Okay. And just a comment here, what if the feds come up with other standards?
The feds we've had and participate very closely with the federal government in climate change issues. They have said that they will work with the provinces, and there is a meeting actually at the end of January with environment ministers across the country, and there's expected to be another First Ministers meeting later in the winter, I think end of February, early March. On that table is a conversation about climate change. I think this government and previous works with Department of Environment federally have indicated that there would be the need and recognizing the need to have a collaboration. I think the federal government, from what we've seen to date, is interested in emissions reduction, and they're interested in provinces defining their own ways to get there. So it is possible technically for the federal government to come up with their own standards, but I don't see them stepping in if the province is already working on that system.
Okay. Another comment, conducting regular and accurate greenhouse gas inventories for our community is challenging and resource intensive. Do you foresee the province or possibly the utilities providing this service for municipalities in the future?
Well, again, and that's similar to a question that came up a minute ago. The need to have those data systems and to understand emissions in communities is certainly an important aspect of how municipalities can manage emissions. Whether it will be the province that actually does that, or if the province can support systems and work to roll something out at a larger scale, those are conversations that we need to have and input we need to get from municipalities in terms of how they would like to be engaged as programs are developed. And I'd just like to add that we have no intention of developing programs without that level of consultation. So it is good advice, and I would encourage municipalities and those working in those municipalities to sit back and have a look at your own systems and your own needs to move forward on reducing emissions in your community and bring that forward to us. Okay. So we can understand what those gaps are.
Another question is, will there be specific direction on land use and transportation planning?
That is something that has come up, but in a very peripheral way for the climate conversations. I know that there is a lot more happening in the Department of Environment around land use and transportation systems in the Department of Transport. All of these things are, of course, linked and something we haven't lost sight of, but it's not within the mandate of the climate change group right now. But as I mentioned earlier, we are working cross-ministry to make sure that we're all aligned and that government policy supports all of its initiatives, and we're not working at cross purposes.
Okay. Do you have a sense of what effect the recent international agreement in Paris will have on Alberta's climate change plan?
I wasn't in Paris myself, but in talking to people that were there, Alberta was very well received in terms of the announcement in November and the actions that government is taking to move emissions reduction in Alberta. In terms of international agreements, of course, it's the federal government that signs on to international agreements, and I think the role we'll play in that is through working with Environment Canada, working through the Environment Ministers table, working through the First Minister's table to participate in the federal position and to participate in Canada's reaction to the international agreement.
Okay. In BC, their carbon tax was made revenue neutral by subsequently lowering income tax rates. Is Alberta considering adopting this model?
So when BC talks about revenue neutrality, they have a very specific definition of that, and that is it, that they, through general revenue, the carbon tax would not increase general revenue to the province for additional spending. Alberta's definition of revenue neutral is different than that. As the Premier talked in the presentation she gave in November, revenue neutrality in Alberta is defined to be no additional government spending through the carbon charge. So I talked in my presentation about the recycling opportunities, whether it's through investments or supports. And those are things that go directly to the carbon policy. So they're either investments to further reduce emissions through things like renewables or energy efficiency, or they're investments to support the transition to this policy, whether it be additional charges on gasoline at the pump, or if it's coal communities attempting to transition from coal production and coal-fired power to find additional enterprises in those communities.
Okay, now there's two related comments from both inputs, so just bear with me, Sandra. Will landfills and water treatment plants be covered by a sector-specific emissions standards or limits? Will there be a cost applied to these emissions in another way? And a related question was, will there be any regulations related to landfill management reducing methane emissions?
Those things haven't come up, and there is no intention right now to apply the methane protocols to municipal or agriculture methane. It's strictly about oil and gas. I haven't seen any talk of performance standards in those sectors.
Okay. And I don't know what this is, but I'll just pose the question. Will RECs replace offsets for renewable energy generation?
So RECs are renewable energy certificates, and I referred in my presentation to the electric system operator defining a mechanism to advance renewables through some sort of transfer and guarantee of revenue. Renewable energy credits is one way to do that, and they're looking at the total system. Offsets, I expect, though we haven't defined everything down to that level of detail, but I do expect that offsets will still remain available to renewable energy generation. It comes down to, if they're not available, then the revenue required for RECs will have to increase. So there are economic challenges to renewable energy, and we're working with the ISO and the Department of Energy to help define what the programs would be to make sure that renewable energy moves forward at a rate that the government has set out, which is ambitious, and so there will definitely need to be attention put to how the system can facilitate that renewable energy.
Okay, and the next one. This morning I heard on the news regarding the meeting the targets. Currently, it is my understanding that we are looking at a 1.5% emissions reduction. It was implied that municipalities will take a role. Will there be support for large and small municipalities for the establishment of the plan?
I don't see that question there, Ted, and I'm not quite sure where the 1.5 is coming from. Is that the announcement in Paris?
I'm not sure. It's coming through the chat window.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if the person who asked that question can elaborate.
Okay, well, it's actually Mayor Charlene Brown. So Charlene, if you want to add some detail via the chat window. In the meantime, I'll go to the next one on the Q&A side. I would love to see electricity generation taken out of the hands of huge corporations and given to municipalities, small companies, individuals, and farmers. Let's move to this system.
There is, I think, opportunity to grow distributed energy with this new climate plan. There is opportunity for individuals and small organizations and small municipalities to participate in district heating systems, district energy systems, in renewables. And so if there are any of those groups that are interested in becoming power producers, I think they need to stay tuned and see how the renewable energy systems will roll out. Stay tuned in terms of how government will be supporting energy transition for municipalities, whether that's energy efficiency or through small-scale energy systems. So it's certainly of interest to government that we move to a more distributed power system. I think for the near and medium term, though, large systems, large generators are still going to be necessary to be a backbone to the Alberta grid, but I think there's still lots of opportunity for others to participate as well.
Okay, and Mayor Charlene Brown had added a comment on her post in the chat window. I think that is what I heard from the federal environment ministers. And just to sort of recap about that, it was this morning, heard on the news regarding the 1.5% emissions reduction. It was implied that municipalities would take the role in support of large and small municipalities for the establishment of a plan. So I guess she heard it from a federal environment minister.
Yeah. I haven't seen that, but I do know that in the press releases that the federal government have released since their election 2 months ago, they have talked quite a lot about infrastructure funding for efficiencies and for emissions reductions. I expect there will be programming available at that level, but they haven't shared that with us. So I think a lot happening at the federal government as well to take part in the energy transition. Okay.
And will the GOA be hosting stakeholder workshops in 2016 with municipalities to discuss the development of the energy efficiency and renewable energy rebate programs?
Right. So we are just right now, this very week, actually building our program for 2016 in terms of consultation. I expect there definitely will be, but I can't say when and where and who and any of those things. But we certainly, as I said earlier, have no expectation that we could build systems and programs without talking to the people that actually have to implement them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another one is, what kinds of incentives could be considered for community photovoltaic development and renewable energy job training?
What sorts of programs?
Incentives.
Yeah, incentives. In terms of the renewable energy, we talked about the ISO and their plan to do some auctions. I think we are going to be working over the next few months to define exactly how we could do that and how those systems and opportunities can be taken advantage of. The expectation is that there will be a significant amount of revenue coming in through the carbon price and also through the specified gas emitters. And so recycling that and finding those investment opportunities will take, it will take some time, but it will also take a lot of partnerships. it will take partnerships at municipal level and across the province. So early days yet. We can't say what those programs exactly will look like. We're still in the defining stage and attempting to build a work plan for 2016 that provides advice to government so that they can make those announcements.
Okay. The next question here is, how will the climate change strategy division link to other divisions of the department, strategy, policy, operations?
So I've had many conversations across at my level, and I know some folks in the division have had conversations. Still a little bit early days in terms of how we make some of those connections. Right now we're working quite hard with the operations group to find our budget for 2016 and to support the revenue budgeting that will happen through the specified gas emitters reg. We will, I think, even notwithstanding that air emissions are no longer part of the climate change group, they will always be a very important part of what we do, and we'll have to make sure that we connect quite strongly with them. I also realize that land use planning is going to require a lot of connections from us, and we look forward to working with those folks and helping to frame out what that regulatory requirement is going to have to look like to implement land use framing and to ensure that emissions are captured in all those conversations.
Okay, and another question for you, Sandra, is will there still be an opportunity for offsets projects?
It is my expectation that there will. I think we do have to look at the offset program more broadly, but there has been the expectation that offsets and protocols will be an important part of the system to maintain some stability and to give large final emitters those options as they attempt to manage their emissions.
Okay. And will alternative energy from small generators be given a fair price for electricity sold back to the grid, e.g. feed-in tariff?
There has been no conversations about feed-in tariffs. The panel's advice and government's conversations have been around things like renewable energy credits, so that you're talking specifically about the renewable component of the energy, not the energy itself. So I don't expect that feed-in tariffs will be part of the system. The price that generators get is, I think the asker of the question would understand, is pool prices or commercial power purchase arrangements that they set up.
Okay. Given the phase out of coal and expected new generation by natural gas and wind, and the time it normally takes to plan, build, reclaim these facilities, will there be a need to consider reducing regulatory hurdles to meet the 2013 commitments?
I think the regulatory framework is in place to meet a number of objectives, and getting power on the system when we need it is one of them, but it's not the only one. And so respecting what that framework is put in place to do and to achieve is important. We still have quite a bit of time between now and 2030. Obviously, 15 years, a lot can happen. So before coal is completely off the grid, we have some time to implement change. We have time to see investors come in and step up with renewables and coal. So I don't know if there is a need necessarily to streamline or reduce regulatory burden for this specific issue. If there are regulatory challenges with process, I think they have to work themselves out in their own way. But for this specific objective and set of outcomes, I don't see it as a necessity. Having said that, I know the Department of Energy is reviewing the microgrid regulation, which will help support and has helped support a lot of very small scale renewable power. That is an opportunity, I think, to expand that program and to expand its reach, but early days yet in terms of their consultation process.
Okay. And with so many details to be yet worked out, what specific steps can smaller municipalities take today to begin the process of addressing emissions at a local level?
I think the first step would be to understand the emissions in your community and perhaps do some research as to what other communities of your size and scale have been able to accomplish. That, I think, would give you the base knowledge as to what opportunities are out there and what emissions can be sort of easily dealt with. Looking at, for example, your own facilities, your own buildings, and assessing their energy efficiency might be a good starting point, and then taking that broader to the community writ large. Until government's ready to make specific announcements on how municipalities will be supported through this, it's still, I think, a process of attempting to define your opportunities that might be available to you and getting ready for when those announcements do come, that you have put some thought into what solutions would best suit your community.
Okay, excuse me. And if a landfill is defined as a large emitter, say 100,000 tons plus, will it still fall under the SGER or new regs, or did you say that landfills are not expected to be regulated under the new system?
So the methane objectives, the targets to reduce methane doesn't include landfill, so that is strictly oil and gas. It is my understanding that there's one, if not two, landfills in the province that come under specified gas emitters, but I'm not familiar with exactly how that system applies there.
Okay. And this comment, you mentioned 2/3 of coal power would be replaced by renewables and then 30% of power to come from renewables. Can you explain the difference?
So one is about the actual power production. So if you have a windmill, it doesn't generate electricity 24 hours a day. It only generates electricity when the wind is blowing. So you might have a 500 kilowatt wind generator. It doesn't produce 500 kilowatts of electricity every hour. So one is on capacity. The capacity of that windmill is 500 kilowatts, but its actual power production in a year is however many hours the wind is blowing, and it can actually produce power. So the difference between the two numbers is one is on actual power generation. So if you want 500 megawatts of renewable energy, you have to build much more than 500 megawatts of capacity to enable that generation. The other one is about the actual capacity. So two different concepts, and I know it does get confusing, but that is the difference. One is about capacity, and the other one is about actual power generation.
Okay. Next comment was, I believe the mayor of Edmonton heard was limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees increases, not 1.5% to emissions.
So that is what came out of Paris. I think the federal minister a few days ago referred to getting the participants in COP to start working towards limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees. Previous to that, most people were working on a 2-degree assumption that we needed to limit emissions to a point that globally climate didn't change by more than 2 degrees. Now the concept of 1.5 degrees is out there. I think they readily acknowledge that that's a stretch target, but that is my understanding of those concepts and where the 1.5% is coming from.
And
the 1.5 degrees, sorry.
Yes. Would your division be open to provide periodic progress updates on implementation? For example, a web conference like these every 2 months or so?
Absolutely. we're also putting together a plan with the Public Affairs Bureau to provide broader updates as well. I think we can. The challenge becomes I can only speak to certain things, and government, of course, has to make decisions. So if folks are satisfied with getting a lot of we don't knows yet, then I'm absolutely open to having a conversation.
Okay. And the next question is nuclear power on the table.
The way the power system works in Alberta is that it's for investors to define and decide what they want to generate, or their source of the source of the power generation. Obviously, we've talked about coal, and that beyond 2030 won't be permissible anymore. But up to this point, the conversation has always been about allowing investors flexibility to make proposals and to work through the regulatory system. So government did a review, I think back in 2009 or 2010, on nuclear power, and government has been neutral on that because no investor has really come forward with a proposal in recent days. I know back when natural gas prices were really high, people were talking about it. But the challenge right now in Alberta, quite frankly, is nobody can compete with natural gas. It's so low that other forms of power really struggle, and it's a big reason why we need to provide incentives to renewable energy as well.
Well, and what I would say is the last question for you to respond to, Sandra, is has the government of Alberta done an assessment on the cost impact on your own operations? Will there be a standardized methodology to do this assessment that will be released?
I haven't seen a government-wide assessment of costs in terms of the carbon charge and how it will impact businesses and buildings and anyone in the heat business. So no, I haven't seen one. If there is somebody in the Department of Infrastructure working on that, it hasn't been made available to me.
Well, in closing of your session, Sandra, thanks so much for being willing to do this. In total, there were up to a maximum of 83 participants. And I think between the chat window and the Q&A, you actually responded and answered roughly 35 questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so job well done. Excellent.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And, you know, like I said before, my apologies for having to say we don't know yet. We're still working on it. But we are excited by the opportunity to participate in these sorts of things. And I appreciate that most people watching are in the policy business themselves, so they know how it rolls out. And we do have to take some time to provide the right advice to government.
Well, excellent. Thanks so much, Sandra, for agreeing to do this. And just for everybody who is tuned in now, we do have another session going tomorrow between 1 and 2 p.m., which features a group from actually Edmonton in terms of the chair of the Green Municipal Fund, our own Ben Henderson, as well as several other folks from the Green Municipal Fund, which is a funding mechanism for local government to implement green initiatives, and I think there's a budget of around 300 million. So yeah, hopefully some folks can tune in to our very last session before Christmas. So again, Sandra, thanks so much for doing this. It was excellent.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.